Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's installment of the Science of Cold Calling. Today, we're focusing on how strong openings can improve pipeline quality, specifically why the first 30 seconds of a cold call matters so much, what buyers are reacting to in that moment, and how sales leaders can coach their team to create stronger early conversations. We'll also bring the conversation to life with a real-life role play in this session. Before we jump in, I wanted to take a moment to introduce myself and our special guest. My name is Ava Zannino, and I'm the Senior Director of Commercial Delivery in our Virginia office. I've been with memoryBlue for about 5 years. I originally started as an SDR myself. I was a delivery manager coaching SDRs directly. And now for the past 2 years, I've had the opportunity and pleasure to step in and manage the Virginia office as a whole. I'm excited to be joined today by Dr. Bielecki Balducci, Assistant Professor of Marketing at Washington University. Bielecki brings research-backed perspectives to buyer personas, first impressions, and how people evaluate interactions in real time, which is a perfect fit for today's conversation and cold call openers. Bielecki, I'd love to pass it over to you for a quick introduction.
Yes, thank you so much. I mean, you hit all of the major points. I'm an assistant professor at Washington State University, and my research is very in alignment with memoryBlue's focus. That is, I research cold calling. So I've had the pleasure of working with memoryBlue for several years now, and I'm really excited to join the show. So thank you so much for having me.
Perfect. Let's get into it. So let's start off with the first 30 seconds shape everything. So as you know, cold calls are quickly judged, often, usually before the pitch actually begins. So I want to first start off with hearing your perspective on, why are the first 30 seconds so important in a cold call?
Yeah, I mean, the first 30 seconds are kind of everything. So this is something that you will see in practitioner journals, books, etc., cold calling guides. They'll all emphasize that first 30 seconds. And the reason why that introduction period is so important is, first of all, we have to take into consideration the context that we're in. It is a cold call. So that means that the salesperson, the SDR, and the prospect really don't have any relationship. They may have spoken very briefly, but the fact is that the call is unsolicited during the middle of the prospect's workday when they probably have a lot of other things they'd rather be attending to than that cold call. So that 30 seconds could be a big chunk of the overall conversation. And because there is no prior relationship, they're going to be evaluating that SDR very heavily during that time. So we know from practice and best practices that that first 30 seconds is very important, but SDRs might be wondering, well, why? Basically, what it comes down to is something that developed in social psychology called thin slice judgments. And what that means is that we as human beings have developed evolutionarily a need to interpret the intentions of unknown individuals very rapidly. And we're actually super good at doing this. So one study it looked at literally just the word hello. So a single word that SDRs probably say at the front of many of their calls. And respondents were able to accurately assess these people based on things like trustworthiness or confidence or extroversion. So even just a single word is giving so much information. So you can imagine how prospects are taking that first 30 seconds and really interpreting what's behind the SDR's intentions, motivation, and if it is worth their time to remain engaged in the conversation.
Yeah, no, that really, resonates with us and specifically memoryBlue and how we coach, right? We say the first 30 seconds, to your point, is really kind of what helps determine how that call is really going to shape up to be, going from, someone's just presence of confidence, but also what they're saying. So, the way that we like to coach the first 30 seconds is to make sure that the prospect knows that they're just not a person on a list that we might be calling down, but really, bringing in the importance of why we're calling them. One thing that we always make sure to hone in on is bringing up someone's LinkedIn. We say that we're on their LinkedIn because they have a hand in XYZ, whatever that may be. So it's not just an ordinary person, but bringing down that barrier to make sure that they feel like, we actually are bringing value to them and, making it a bit more personable.
Great.
Perfect. So now let's transition to, once we understand how quickly these judgments form, the next question begins, what a strong opener, actually looks like. So, I'm curious from your perspective, what does that strong opener actually look like and do?
Yeah, I love the example you gave earlier with talking about the LinkedIn and specifically calling out something on that profile rather than just perhaps the title to kind of minimize that social distance. As we've discussed, I mean, the prospect and SDR are complete strangers for all intents and purposes, but by bridging that gap a little bit, that can reduce that social distance. And kind of diving into that thin slice judgment a little bit further before I give some kind of tangible insights, with those judgments that are formed really rapidly, there are two primary dimensions that human beings will assess others on. And the first is warmth, and the second is competence. Now, according to evolutionary psychology, the warmth dimension is actually the first one that people are judging. The reason why is because when we were evolving as human beings, it was more important to know if someone was a friend or foe than their level of competence, for example. So people on these calls, SDRs on these calls, are going to be evaluated first by how warm they are perceived. So you want to convey warmth in these calls. Obviously it's not like a close friend interaction, so you don't want to go over the top. But even things like what you mentioned earlier with that LinkedIn, minimizing that social distance can create some warmth, like they're the person that they selected because of their skills, not just some random person they called. They can also convey warmth through things like having a upbeat tone. And once again, this is all within, reasonable limits, but having a monotone voice will kind of convey like you're not interested in the conversation, or perhaps convey that you're cold. But being increasing the fluctuation of your pitch, for example, and cadence of your voice will convey that warmth as well. Now, because this is a cold call and because the prospect is, not really worried about whether or not the SDR is going to harm them or not, that secondary dimension kicks in pretty quickly. And that's the competence dimension. That is how capable, effective, intelligent are you? Now, as an SDR, it's incredibly important that you convey a lot of competence. And you can do so by expressing a confident voice, things like louder volume, the rate of your speech, also the language that you choose can be very important in conveying that competence. And as I mentioned, that is going to take over and become the primary dimension upon which you are evaluated moving forward after that initial stage, because at the end of the day, the prospect is wondering, why are you calling me? What can you do for me? And is it worth my time to remain on the line?
Yeah, no, that sheds a lot of light on, and it's great to see that what we coach and how we develop our SDRs are actually aligning with backed data from you. So that's a good sign. But from a manager perspective, the warmth aspect. So I know I brought it up in our first point of I'm probably just conditioned to say, do you have a hand in XYZ? But in reality, it's kind of like not making it generic, but more so personal, and bringing that warmth in of saying, I see that you are the VP of sales instead, versus I saw you have a hand in, your go-to-market strategy, or I see you have a hand in, accelerating your business growth in 2026. It brings down that warmth and that barrier of making it more personable. And then the competence aspect of it. I think that's really important too, because, I know we spoke about this in the first, book one of cold calling series that we've done is, the tone, the presence, and also being human, right? And that's at that competence level. A lot of times, what I found is SDRs might sound kind of robotic to your point of, they might be just reading something verbatim and they might know it and be confident, but it might not be portrayed that way in a cold call live to that competence aspect. So it's that bringing that human aspect into that as well of being competent on the phones, because at the end of the day, prospects want to talk to people that they can relate to, that are human and they can have a full-blown conversation with, rather than a robot or, someone that doesn't have emotion or a personality, if that makes sense.
100%.
So, from your perspective, how important is it for the opener to feel personal without being too casual?
I think that I would say that definitely anything you can do to personalize is going to be very helpful, as I mentioned earlier, to reduce that perceived social distance. And as far as, seeming too casual, I think SDRs have good heads on their shoulders from what I can tell, because I've listened to a weird amount of cold calls from memoryBlue. And so no one is going to a super extreme of casualness like, sup, but they are kind of incorporating a little bit more conversational tone, which actually I've done some research on memoryBlue's calls, and having a little bit more casual language is helpful. So that I think the SDRs have that balance on lock. They're not going too over the top in terms of casualness. If anything, at times I will see SDRs being a little bit too formal. So based on what I've seen so far, I'd say think a little bit less about the robot, like try to be less robotic, to your point, which tends to be on the more formal dimension, and try to just have a conversation with somebody.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting that you say that, because as you were talking about, the formal words, something that really came to mind is, we sell a lot of complex softwares as well as services in the tech world with our, variety of customers. And they probably can get really complicated and sometimes like way over my head in what they mean and what they do. And sometimes, we have to take a step back and educate our customers of, especially in the first 30 seconds, it's almost a what not to do and using, the industry jargon or the acronyms, because at the end of the day, you're catching someone out of the blue and it's in the middle of their workday where they probably have 400 things on their mind, right? So it's kind of being professional, but also using simple language and simple phrases. So someone that is being caught off guard can understand what you're saying, even though they might do what you're talking about in complicated words. It doesn't register or resonate as much as it would if you just use simple language.
I couldn't agree more. And I think, sometimes SDRs want to use that more formal terminology to demonstrate their knowledge. And having that knowledge is amazing. And I would encourage SDRs to keep that in their back pocket, because if prospects do have questions, you can pull that out and you can seem very knowledgeable, which is going to go a long way. But at the end of the day, in the first 30 seconds, which is kind of the topic of this this specific webinar, is really just about piquing interest. That's what you're trying to do in the first 30 seconds. So anything that you're doing that detracts from that is not going to be helping you. To your point, it's more of like what not to do.
Yeah, sometimes less is more, right?
Exactly.
Perfect. So, with all these principles that we've discussed and the importance behind them, the next thing we need to talk about is why one script is never really enough. So from a manager perspective, we want consistency across a team, but we also, know that one script is not going to work for every rep, every buyer, or every call for that matter. So, how should leaders think about coaching openers without making everyone sound identical?
Yes. I mean, I would say that one of my favorite aspects of sales is that it is outcome focused more than it is process focused. And so these principles that you're learning in this show right now, that your managers are training you on, keep them in mind. I mean, they're not telling you anything to harm you. They really are backing this up with a lot of data, experience, and knowledge, but incorporate your own personal flair. And I think that's really important in today's world, especially because memoryBlue is uniquely situated as a company that hires actual people to do this SDR work. And I think you want to demonstrate that you are a human being, right? Like with the development of conversational AI, you may have experienced a prospect asking if you are an AI, but you can show them that you are, your true authentic self, which goes a long way for people in today's world by incorporating your own personal flair. Now, what does that mean? That means that you should still take the advice that your managers give you in terms of like the nuts and bolts very seriously, because trust me when I say they want you to succeed. But what you can do is incorporate aspects of your personality to that presentation. So if you are somebody who is very serious or perhaps very introverted, or insert descriptor that fits you, you don't want to convey things in a way that just feels very unauthentic, because that's going to come off as incredibly clunky and probably disingenuous. So if you are somebody who is a genuinely upbeat person, incorporate some of that into it. I was visiting the Seattle office, and there was an SDR there that every time they say, introduce themselves, they say happy Monday or Tuesday or whatever, and then they get on with their pitch, but that's just kind of their vibe. And I think that if it fits your personality, it's going to come off as authentic, and that's going to go a long way.
Yeah, no, that I couldn't agree more with that statement. And that's one thing that I loved to coach on. And it's that authenticity. And I like to say to people sometimes when they were getting caught up in their script, or they were getting caught up in the moment, I always tell them, like, you're just cold calling, have fun with it. Bring your own spin to it, show your personality, because again, at the end of the day, especially with AI being so prominent, I'm a very big believer in be human. People want to talk to humans and have that human interaction and conversation. So, here at memoryBlue, we always have we call it a sheet music. It's a script, but we like to make it fun. So, the way that we like to have the sheet music is it has the core components of a call: opening statement, questions that you can have at hand, all of that good stuff. But that is just your foundational aspect of what you need. From there, that's where you kind of take it back. You really understand the foundational parts of, what you're selling. But then when you go to deliver it, add your own spin to it to make it, your own, right? So, because at the end of the day, what you say would be completely different to what I say on the phone, because we're two different people, two different personalities, but we still might be getting the same message across. So that's what the most important thing from, a coaching aspect, and what I always like to look for is less about, are they saying verbatim what's on the paper, but more, are they still getting their message across? Are they accomplishing the task at hand, which is getting through those first 30 seconds of a call? And, one of my favorite exercises that I love to do when some of my reps would sometimes be getting caught up in the first 30 seconds is I would take their piece of paper away from them. I'm like, okay, tell me what this is in your own words and how you would say it on the phone. From there, they're able to do it, and they still get all the foundational aspects of the first 30 seconds, there, but they made it their own. And believe it or not, they were able to get more conversations with prospects and get through those 30 seconds of a call.
That's a great strategy.
Yeah. Some people might not like it on the receiving end, but after the fact, then that's one of those moments, like an aha moment for them. But, I'm curious, how should managers balance that consistency aspects with that authenticity while they're coaching, openers?
I would would say just as a manager, just knowing what the core elements are that really need to be there. And as managers, you do know that, right? Like you guys have all been in an SDR role. You have firsthand experience. You know what is not fluff at all that absolutely has to be there. And so just emphasize, like if someone's getting overwhelmed, if an SDR is getting overwhelmed by the sheet music, because like you mentioned, some of the services are very complex. Just be like, okay, if you could do in your own words as you did, Ava, where you have the SDR kind of come up with like 3 bullet points that are critical about this product or whatever they're selling, and be like, okay, these have to be incorporated in every single call. But how you present the information can differ. Let's do some role plays and see how that might look. So I would say just trying to trim the fat and, encouraging them to incorporate their own flair, maybe even calling it out and rewarding it during team huddle would be a great step.
Yeah, no, I love it. So, transitioning here to the part at hand is, we've discussed a lot of these aspects in theory, right? So I would love to kind of bring everything what we've been talking about to life here. So, as we've been talking through this, I want to introduce, Julie Bielecki. She's a managing director here. And I would love for her to show us in real time 2 versions of an opener. One that creates resistance and one that earns a little bit of participation. But welcome, Julie.
Hi, thanks guys. I'll do a little intro of myself. My name's Julie Bielecki. I'm a managing director here at memoryBlue. I've been at memoryBlue almost 5 years now, coaching and developing SDRs still every single day. I absolutely love it. So I'm super excited to be here with you guys and help be your guinea pig on what a good opener looks like and maybe what a not so good opener looks like.
Okay, and let's start with let's end on a positive note, right? Let's start with a not so good opener. Let's go. I got a little timer on my end. I'm not going to cut you off right at 30 seconds, but just so we can give SDRs or anyone watching like how far you might be able to get within that 30 seconds and what that difference is. I'll just kind of be keeping track on my end, and then we'll debrief. Does that sound like a good plan?
Sounds great. All right. Ring, ring.
Hello.
Hi, Ava.
Yeah.
Hi, Ava. This is Julie Bielecki from memoryBlue. How are you?
I'm a bit busy. What's going on?
Okay. Well, Ava, I'm giving you a call here because I actually saw that you're the VP of Sales at Sumo Logic, and memoryBlue works with other companies to drive pipeline. And I'm just curious how you're currently generating pipeline.
I already have something, kind of built out for that, but thanks for the call.
Okay. Great job. That was like right about time there. So just as a debrief, so some of the things I noticed with that call were that you were a little bit monotone and not like, that's just not good in the sense that like, if you're not interested in the call, why the heck should the prospect be? Mm-hmm. And on top of that, I noticed a few, hesitations and filler words, things like that can give the perception that you are not very confident in what you were saying. And it was kind of feeling like you were reading off a script. Whether or not you were, I couldn't tell you because I've never seen that script, but it kind of felt like it was a little bit mechanical. So those were, and then also like your introduction with, how are you? Realistically, they're not doing well because they're on a cold call. So maybe a little bit of a switcheroo would be good. Ava, do you have any additional perspectives?
Yeah, no, kind of everything that you said definitely, I think pertains to this situation. I think one thing that I want to, double down on is the how are you, right? Like that's one thing that sometimes a lot of people do fall into, especially when they first start, because you think you're calling someone, you want to be nice, friendly, but in reality, it actually makes it worse because, you want to cut right to the chase. You want to be very direct and you want to kind of cut all the fluff out because one, you're calling someone in the middle of their busy day and you want to, get right to the point and they'll respect that. And then two, it just gives them more opportunity to hang up. And you want to get right in there and give yourself that best chance to get your value, through as quick as possible. So the prospect sees that and wants to stay on the phone. Instead of how are you, how we coaches to ask, did I catch you at a bad time or did I catch you in the middle of something? Because cold callers, when you do that, prospects want to say no. They like the negative words. So no, you did not catch me at a bad time, or no, I'm not in the middle of something. So that's what we say to ask right when someone picks up. So then we can get that no to go right into our opening statement.
Yeah, and one thing I really appreciated about what you said was that calling out like the difference between how you might be friendly or warm in a social setting versus a cold call. So, we did talk about warmth as one of those dimensions that is primarily judged upon, but within the bounds of this specific context, which is very constrained. So warmth might look more like having a dynamic vocal tone than saying overtly nice things or being traditionally friendly in a way that you might be to a colleague or a friend or something like that. So I'm glad you pointed that out. Julie, just because you have so much experience with this, what would you say if you were giving feedback to yourself? Anything additional?
Yeah, I'll double, triple click on that. How are you? We really want to make a what we call a permission-based opener and asking the prospect for permission to continue your pitch, because if you don't give that to them, their guard immediately goes up. There's that immediate resistance when you go into your pitch. Another thing I wanted to point out, something that I did specifically for this, is that I only said other companies. Ava probably doesn't care about what other companies are doing, right? And then I just said, help drive pipeline. How are you currently generating pipeline? I'm like, I don't want to go into all that probably if I'm in Ava's shoes. I don't have time. I'm a VP of sales. I got to keep going. So really making it tailored to your prospect, dropping relevant use cases, and making the question really a little bit more digestible for the prospect to answer, because they are on a cold call. They want to answer really straightforward and then open up the conversation that way.
Fantastic. Now, to that end, let's see how you would like to see it. Let's try this again with a strong opener. I'm going to get the clock going on my end, but you can take it away whenever.
All right. Ring, ring.
Hello.
Hi, Ava.
Yeah, this is she.
Hi, Ava. This is Julie Bielecki from memoryBlue. Did I catch you in the middle of anything this afternoon?
No. What's up?
Great. Well, I'm reaching out. I'm actually on your LinkedIn right now, and I noticed your hand in go-to-market strategy for Sumo Logic. And memoryBlue has actually helped other companies like Datadog and Splunk drive over 10 million in pipeline last year alone. So I did my research. I saw you had a couple of SDRs, and I'm curious, are they currently focused on inbound or outbound pipeline generation?
Okay, we're going to end it here, but great job. One thing that came to mind just because you just mentioned it is the specificity with which you went into was much more fine-grained. So not just other companies, to your point, specific names of companies. I noticed that right away. And for me, being someone who looks at language and paralanguage, I was noticing the vocal intonation. And I was also noticing that you were smiling as you were speaking, because it is something that's really kind of funny, but if you smile when you speak, it comes out in your voice. And so, if you are, on the flip side of that, if you are kind of scowling or hunched over at your desk, that's going to make an impact on how your voice is carried. So I thought you did a great job, not only in terms of seeming warm and friendly with that fluctuation in your tone and just kind of the cadence of your voice, but you seem very competent with that, like I said, the specificity, the knowledge that you brought to the table. So that was kind of my first impression. What about you, Ava?
Yeah, I agree with the smiling. Julie and I, fun fact, we were actually SDRs together 5 years ago on the same team. But the smiling aspect, we like to call it smile and dial. That's probably ingrained into our brain at this point, when we're doing it. Because to your point, it makes a difference. Same thing of like when we stand up and call, move around, you're ready, you're energized, and it portrays in the, translates into your call. But going back to the first role play with the how are you, to your point, it might sound, warm, but in this case, kind of, what you said about the tonality, you could hear when Julie said, did I catch you in the middle of something? She sounded very warm and welcoming, but it might have not been in like the actual wordage of how are you, but she's made it sound very warm. The best thing I think in this one that I think really should be highlighted is, to your point, the specificity of it, bringing up companies that relate directly to me, that are my direct competitors, putting a number to it. Wow, 10 million, like that's huge. And something that, if I were to be asked, probably not something that I would have said we're at, but I could use that help. And then wrapping it up, she said at the very end, I've done my research and I see that you have, a couple SDRs already. That is one thing that really stands out to prospects, because at the end of the day, if you're calling a prospect, they're probably in that position where they get 15, 20 cold calls a day. I probably get 10 alone at this point. And what makes us so successful at it is because we stand out because of the research that we do. And going into that call, they are like, wow, we are actually not just a person on a list, but there's a true reason why this person is reaching out to me. And I'm willing to give them a chance because they did their due diligence on me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
I think another thing I want to call out, and this is what I teach all my SDRs, is I'm currently on your LinkedIn. I am looking at a photo of you on LinkedIn right now, and I'm not pulling something that's your title, right? That I could find on just a list that I have uploaded. I'm actually saying that's something I see on your LinkedIn that you have a hand in directly, and tailoring the rest of my pitch to that. And so that's another piece that doesn't make you cold caller 99 that day, but the one that's like, okay, if you hang up on me, I know who you are. I can pick you out off the street. Probably not, but but that's that kind of psychology behind that piece that we try to incorporate into a lot of the opening statements to set ourselves apart.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I was thinking that immediately, and then I forgot because there's too many good things to say. But yeah, I loved the immediacy of that. I'm currently on your LinkedIn. Like, you are active. I think that shows that you are actively invested in that prospect. Not only like speaking with them on the phone, you're looking at like multiple dimensions. You are paying attention to them. And so I think that's a really great touch.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, and just one of the things I've noticed a lot with SDRs at memoryBlue is that they're really good at noting, hey, I saw on LinkedIn that you're the VP of sales or whatever, but just that little extra step. I'm currently on your LinkedIn, or we are working with a company that's going to help working with your competitors or something like that. I think that is something that would be really just take it one step further, and that would go a really long way.
Yeah. One thing that I've also seen work on LinkedIn is taking it one step further of, I'm on your LinkedIn and I actually just shot you a LinkedIn request, because, sometimes prospects will be like, oh, hold on. And they will put a name to your face as well. They'll pull it up, they'll accept it right there. And then they'll be like, oh, I see you work at X company. And again, brings down that barrier and welcomes that conversation and that participation, but not forcing it. But great.
Yes, okay. Thank you so much for joining us, Julie. We appreciate it.
Perfect. Okay. So to wrap up, we want to leave everyone with a practical resource they can use to keep building on the conversations with their teams. If today's conversation gave you the framework, Book 2 of the Ultimate Caller's Guide gives you the practical next step. It expands on how strong openings create relevance, lowers resistance, and helps teams build more consistent early-stage conversations. Download the guide after this session to keep the conversation going with your team. Biddy, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your perspective. Your insights were incredibly insightful.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.